Welcome to week 2. We're going to be covering chapter 9 on how to use and manipulate and traverse the DOM, the document object model. The bottom line for this week is that the DOM manipulation methods allow you to get and set attribute values. They also let you insert, wrap, copy, even replace and remove DOM elements. DOM traversal methods involve the use of siblings, children, and parent methods, which, if you go back and think about the hierarchy structure, that the higher you are on the hierarchy, the older, like grandparents and parents, and the lower you go, you get into children and siblings, and even ancestors. But having those, it allows you to filter a set of elements so that you can actually choose by option the elements that you want. There are on and off event methods that are particularly useful for DOM manipulation, as they allow you to attach an event handler or remove an event handler from the objects that don't exist in the DOM. There's even an end method that facilitates chaining of methods because it actually returns the chaining object to the one that was used when it was started. So let's look at a few of these. The document object model gives us options through the manipulation and traversal methods, changing of events, and it gives us options when updating our code to make our site more flexible and more scalable. The working with and setting of attributes you can see here are the ATTR using a name and value, and the ability at the bottom to remove one, especially if you wanted to use an attribute to name a function. Some of the examples for attributes: setting the value for a source attribute of an image is at the very top, where you have the image in quote with the dollar symbol that reflect the book 1 JPEG. That's where the attribute comes in. You want to use a map to set those values of the two attributes. You can actually use the image in quote with a attribute of a source book 1 JPEG, but because we're using 2, you can have the alternate one as book 1. Using a function to set the value of an href attribute uses the a element, as you can see here, with the href function of an index. Now remember, in IT land, indexes begin just with the number of 0. They don't actually begin with 1, as we'll see later. Some of the methods working for class attributes: you can toggle one, you can remove one, you can add one, and just basically set one as a class. Class attributes, with examples here, using a sort of a selection statement, allow you to say if a certain FAQ, which is an assignment in the book, has class, then it's closed. We can add a class with that .add class feature, or remove the minus class from that class attribute using the h2 descendants. Some of the methods that will be used for replacement in the DOM are the val, text, HTML, and replace with or replace all. Some of those examples of DOM replacement involve these here. You can do an alert of an aside. With HTML, put an h2 element into an aside element, as it refers to something like a table of contents or an abstract or some other topic that might not be at the top, but it could be further down in the page. You can replace, of course, using the replace with, which is replacing the old with the new, and then replace all elements from an old one using an h2 element using the replace all function. DOM inserting and cloning methods include these here: the prepend, append, before, insert, after, and clone. These will give you the options to really make changes and updates to your DOM that add more flexibility to the coding and options on your site as it refers to text and images. DOM inserting and cloning examples include these here, where you can append or do an insert as you can tell, the coding of this stuff is fairly similar to the same kind of coding we work with in HTML5 as well as CSS. So syntax and understanding the importance of making sure that all the quotes have an open quote, end quote, all of the less than sign have a greater than sign, and so on, to make sure that there's no syntax error that could give us an error message if we were going to insert, to clone, or to make a change to some of our DOM examples. Wrapping and removal is also part of it. You have wrap elements, wrap functions, wrap all, wrap enter, and remove. Some of those can be seen here as the A wrap elements using H2. You can wrap the H1 text in an A element using R_H1 wrap enter, and then do that AID at the top. Remember that when you see H1 and H2, we're really kind of referring to like the heading elements. And the lower the number, the higher that text of a title should be. So H2 is generally something that's like a subtopic, like a table of contents or an abstract or something like that. Something not at the top, but something somewhere in the middle. This one is part of the assignment for week 2, looking at the user interface of a TOC application. TOC meaning table of contents. Okay, so you see the code here, and this is referenced on page 309 and partially on 310 in your book. This is the Maroc book, 2015. And you can see that you have a table of contents, you have a modular book organization heading, a top-down chapter, a paired pages format, performance, and so on, right? So you look at the code for that, and you can see that why we have some changes that are going to be applied in these headings. We have H1, of why, 7 reasons why trainers like our books, followed by H2, further down. Remember, this is hierarchy structure here, of a modular book organization, and so on. Notice where the highlighting of the yellow is, the other H2 headings and paragraphs, which you'll see here. So we'll make changes to the TOC this way. And your assignment basically is going to have the coding, which will be uploaded to the course website. It'll be in jQuery exercises chapter 9 TOC, TOC. And you should find coding that allows you to actually run this. Okay, so there'll be an HTML, like an index HTML file, there'll be CSS, and then there'll be a JavaScript file. And in this, you should be able to make changes with an event handler, adding IDs to an A element, rewriting code that uses the function of the attribute method. So you can, instead of having to set each event to set their IDs, you can actually rewrite the code to do it in a much more efficient fashion. Okay, so remember, note the highlights here of the H2, the part at the top, the ID heading 1, the href heading 2, and the back to the top area. So we're going to add an H2 element for table of contents, wrap that text in an H2 using the A elements that I mentioned before, add the correct ID attribute for those A elements, then clone them, remove the ID attributes from the A elements in the aside, add the correct href attributes, wrap those with top, and then insert. So it should go to the H1 element. Looking like this. Gives it more structure. Making the changes will make the ability for us to use and peruse through the table of contents, selecting modular book organization, top-down, or paired pages format, and a much more efficient method with the coding supporting that. And that's what jQuery does for us. further on in the code why the href attributes that I mentioned regarding the A tags and the aside, wrap that A tag with H1 text and then insert back to the top. Back to the top is the same thing you see around each page when you're already halfway through or near the bottom of a page, but you forgot something, or maybe you want to recheck something at the very top or near the top, and that link on the left nav or the right nav side allows you to go back up there. That's what that back to the top gives us. Some of the styles we'll be working with relating to CSS give you right here some structure in the formatting part regarding the height, the width, inside and outside, as well as the naming function and the map. Style samples include the ones we've established here as being blue. And remember that whenever you see a lot of these tags that are linked, they're basically the same color as blue, and essentially the same color as you see up here in the style samples right there. And of course we'll use method for positioning and offsets, again relating to formatting. Setting these coordinates of a new object, starting to offset the top, add the aside coordinates of top being 200, left being 100, and then move the scroll bar. And this is what it will move. This is what it will look like. So we'll add an event handler, change for the CSS selected to the top, use the ID for the selected H2 element, and its attribute is href, change the styles and CSS to blue, font size that's going to be modified and enhanced up to 1.5 times or 150%, then move the aside so it's next to the selected heading. Now a lot of the stuff that you're seeing on these slides are actually covered in that chapter, chapter 9, on how to use the DOM, including traversal and manipulation methods. So a lot of the stuff you see here in these slides, if you haven't seen it in the book yet, this is actually in the book in that chapter. And 2 event methods, pretty much binary stuff, on and off events for selector and handler. So another option for a different assignment that's available in your book in terms of an exercise, I think it's also in chapter 9. A click event that handles the H2 element, as you can see here. It's the click function for an event handler, and you have an on and off event method that handles the click event of an H2. And you can see these here. Now you've probably seen this somewhere on a page if you wanted to, say, request for more information or contact somebody. Usually it's a page that has like a contact us link, and you wanted to add some information like your name, your phone number, and an email address and a comments field. It's almost the exact same formatting as you see here that we're adding an employee to an employee list, which again is in chapter 9 as part of an exercise. And the coding for HTML, CSS, and jQuery that allows what you see here to occur involves those events and set attributes. So every time you add somebody, it adds to the list here. And the coding that supports that ability to add it, seen here. Again, most of this stuff seems and looks just like the same HTML coding, not all that different from CSS as well for formatting. But if you've ever added something to a website about like a contact me, or you wanted to send something to have somebody follow up with you, the coding that allows that to happen is basically what you're seeing here. So let's look at the jQuery stuff for this. So some of the jQuery that allows us to use this in the DOM, we click have the on element in H2. We'll have a toggle class and then an attribute set to minus. Remember, it's using an if-else, so that's a selection statement. So if it's not one, it's the other, right? Have an in-click or then an add to click that function, which will give us an H2 href of adding and then setting the position with H3 using an accordion, a name, and a position and description of that information. And that's the stuff that you saw in the previous couple slides with name, job title, and the information about that person. And some of the ability, if you see here, to move, or I should say traverse the DOM, and we're talking about like a lineage, a tree, is the involvement of ancestors, grandparents, parents, siblings, children, that kind of thing, and that's coming up. So some of the movement methods to go through the DOM tree: siblings, next, children, parents, pretty much everything you'll see in your book in chapter 9 as well. And of course, the more you familiarize yourself with this and actually use them in an example like the one we saw with talk or employee list, the more easier it becomes. And I'll add a link later on, perhaps to a jQuery site. There's a jQuery.com site that's very useful that has all kinds of coding examples, videos, stuff relating to jQuery coding and using the jQuery library. Remember, jQuery is like a subset of JavaScripting with its own library. And it has all kinds of examples of how to use this within local or typically very large websites. And adding jQuery gives you, again, the ability to use more functionality with less coding. So you can get more done in less time. Thinking about efficiency. Other traversal movement samples going from a previous paragraph sibling to another element. You can use the .prev for P. Note the parent of an element there. The FAQs, if you see that, it's also relating to an example or an exercise in chapter 9 as well. Some of the filtering methods that were used for jQuery in chapter 9 include these here in terms of being able to filter, to not filter. It's equal or it has this first, last, slice, end, and you can see the use of these examples here. Change the property of an H2 element. We're going to filter it this way through CSS to red, or we're not going to do it. The first one's via CSS. We can hide images in the slides using a slice 1, and then establish using the first and end points, working within the images of a set. Sort of like being able in PowerPoint to fade in or to fade out to another slide. Okay, so again, review the lectures, use these videos. Again, I'll try to add something related to YouTube. Use the jQuery.com site, it's very useful for this, and the coding samples within chapter 9 to make sure that it gives you the flexibility and understanding how to use the DOM, but also be able to traverse it, moving inside and throughout, as well as being able to change and manipulate it. Have a good week. Have a good day.